Today we're talking about theme, and I'm going to use To Kill a Mockingbird as an example. For those who don't know what a theme is, which I think most should, but we'll cover this anyway, it's a moral lesson about life that is portrayed in a work of fiction. Okay? And it's usually seen throughout the work, usually a lot of key plot points, key characters and characteristics and interactions are built around that theme and help show the audience this particular theme. Whenever I'm teaching my students, I like to talk about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. Talk about with great power comes great responsibility, because that is really heavily shown in the first two films. If Peter had been responsible, his uncle would not have died, most likely. In the second movie, there's that scene where he doesn't have powers and there's the burning building. He runs in, tries to save somebody, and he saves one person, and then he finds out afterwards, oh, somebody else died. And he knows deep down that if he still had his powers, if he was in his right mindset, he would have been able to save both. He had the power, he didn't at the moment, but if he had his power, he could have done it, and he would have had the responsibility to do it. Whenever a bad guy like Doc Ock, Green Goblin show up, it's always his responsibility to deal with it, because he has the power to stop them, unlike other people. So that's always my example. So what is the example in To Kill a Mockingbird? Well, it's pretty easy. You probably know this, and Atticus says it very clearly. You do not understand someone until you see things from their point of view. And that is done throughout the book. It's introduced very early with Scout when she goes to school for the first time, and her teacher is from another town. And she doesn't understand how the families act. She doesn't understand why kids are a certain way. And Scout kind of puts her foot in her mouth a little bit with her new teacher, because again, she's a little girl. She doesn't always understand how to interact with adults, and she gets really mad about how her teacher treats her. Granted, the teacher was, a little out of line in some cases, but if you have a 6-year-old trying to tell you what to do or correcting you, most adults usually get a little irritated with that, particularly when, the adult is in charge of the situation, like, teaching. But after her first day of school, Atticus, lays this theme out for her and says you got to understand things from their point of view. And that's something that Scout practices throughout the book. It's very obvious in some places, like the courtroom scene. The courtroom scene is a great example, because you have the Ewells who are lying about what Tom did, and from her vantage point where Scout is sitting, she sees the Ewells not just as horrible human beings, but she understands why they are a certain way. Like, why is Bob Ewell just so horrible a person? Well, he's the lowest of the low in society. And he wants to, at least in his racist mind, be considered better than black people. Meanwhile, his daughter is very lonely, and she clings to the only person who tried to show her any kindness, which was Tom. And then, her father finds out, and then she tries to cover up her misdeed. Again, they're both horrible people. The book doesn't try and pretend that they're not. But still, sorry for the cough, Scout understands them. You have, what was another great example? She understands her aunt a little bit better, because, the aunt is a bit of a tyrant. Alexandra is horrible in a lot of ways, but over time, Scout begins to understand her strength, what she's good at doing. And, there's the town drunk that, I can't remember his name, but everyone in town just automatically assumes he's a drunk. And during the courtroom scene, Scout and Dill, they step out and they meet this guy, and he's always carrying this, brown bag with a drink in it, and he gives a little bit of it to Dill, and Scout is horrified, thinking he's giving liquor to a kid, and turns out it's just Coca-Cola. And the man is basically, he doesn't care what other people think about him, but he's trying to spare their feelings. So he's thinking, they don't like me. Well, I'll give them a reason to not like me. I'll make them think that I'm a drunk, even though I'm not. And I prefer being this way, but they wouldn't understand it, so I'll give them something they can understand. It's a little bit of some backwards logic maybe, but I mean, to each their own. And of course, the best example of this theme comes at the very end of the book with Boo Radley. Boo Radley's introduced as a bit of an enigma early on in the book. So many people haven't seen him. What's Boo Radley like? The kids want to know. But as they get older, they kind of forget about Boo. They don't really care what he's up to. And then, of course, the big reveal is Bob Ewell, attacks Jim, and Scout tries to kill him, and somehow they get out of the situation. And as the aftermath unfolds, it becomes very clear that Boo Radley came out of his house and he killed Bob to save the kids. And obviously it's a pretty great moment in the book, and we get to meet Boo, and Scout just has no fear of the guy, and she even walks with him all the way back to her house, and not her house, his house. And when they get to the door and Boo goes in, Scout turns around and she sees her street from the Radley point of view, from Boo's point of view. And she reflects on what has happened in the book, certain pivotal moments in the book. And that's kind of where it's solidified that Scout does understand people, or at least she's able to sit down and try and think about things from another perspective. I'll go ahead and just say, great theme. Masterfully portrayed, in my opinion. Some might disagree. I don't know who would, but I'll just leave it with this. If you've not read To Kill a Mockingbird, if for some reason you didn't have to read it in school, please go read this book. I think it's pretty obvious. Most people have probably read it, but still, go ahead and read it. And if you read it in school, go read it again. See if it holds up. Because for me it did, and I'm pretty sure it will hold up for you too. Maybe you might develop a new appreciation for it. Thanks for watching. Bye.